Our last presenter is Michael Fenn. He will give us our last presentation today, Maximizing the Value of Innovation. Michael Fenn is a senior advisor at Strategy Corp. Prior to his position with Strategy Corp, Michael was an Ontario Deputy Minister under three premiers. He was a municipal chief administrator in Hamilton and Burlington, and the founding CEO of both Metrolinx and Mississauga-Halton Local Health Integration Network. He now writes and consults on municipal and infrastructure issues. A certified board director, he serves on the boards of the $85 billion OMERS AC pension fund and the Toronto Lands Corporation, which is Toronto Board of Education's realty arm. His municipal management career was recently profiled with a chapter in the book, Leaders in the Shadows, The Leadership Qualities of Municipal Chief Administrative Officers, written by Professor David Siegel. Michael's latest research report, looking at Ontario's infrastructure planning, priority setting, and improving AFP, was published in September by the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. Join me in welcoming Michael Fenn.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to you for sticking with it, and we're working through to the last presentation. I trust at least that you're going to learn something from all three sets of presentations, because I think the quality is of those who went before me certainly argues for your endurance. So, we've established that there is an infrastructure gap, and I think the CCPPP and RCCAO and other organizations have done a good job of making that case. We have $130 billion from Ontario committed. We have $160 billion plus an infrastructure bank from the federal government. We heard about the $1 trillion U.S. plan, and we see things like USA Today, Brian Bechtel from Bechtel Construction saying that Infrastructure Ontario's model is one that the United States should follow. But 60% of our infrastructure is in the hands of local governments and other local authorities, and municipalities are planning to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on bridges and schools and waterworks and things of that kind. So are they going to use P3 models going forward, or is it going to be limited to the few very large transit projects and a couple of the projects that won awards here today? Part of the problem is the sticker shock. There's a concern that the costs of major infrastructure projects, whether P3 or otherwise, are very large. But as we've learned, those may look like big figures to us, but yesterday's investments in infrastructure seem like good value for the money and a wise investment. And the other thing is that the infrastructure gap is not just about money. We really have an innovation gap, but the innovation gap also presents the opportunity for us going forward. We've seen a lot of financial innovation, particularly in the alternative financing and procurement model that Infrastructure Ontario uses, but there's all kinds of innovation that we should be seeing and we are seeing, and we should see a lot more of. Innovation in design, construction, technology, funding, operation, and refurbishment. So I guess the message is that wise infrastructure investment serves us for a generation, but importantly, poor infrastructure decisions will burden us for decades, and we can all think of some examples. And the way in which we avoid that is we have to recognize that without good planning and without good project selection, without more practical EA processes, without well-structured P3s, without a competitive P3 marketplace, and without a focus particularly on future needs and megatrends, which we saw a dollop of at lunch today, projects are going to continue to be delayed, money is going to continue to be wasted, and ultimately the taxpayer support for this kind of an initiative is going to melt away. The evidence says, after now 3 decades in the business, that P3s are good insurance. We may be entering a golden age in infrastructure, as we saw in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. But I think it depends on courage and forward thinking, and above all, on innovation. The innovation agenda is important. The research suggests that we could save between 5 and even up to 20% using the P3 model if we are prudent about the way in which we structure them and if we are innovative in the way that we deliver them. So with that little sermonette, I'm going to give you a presentation that you should be able to see from the back of the room if you're inclined to, and it'll give you the 7 measures that I think, through the research that I've done over the last year, that are things that we might do to stay ahead of the game for the next quarter century. First of all, it's important for us to be holistic in the approach and integrated in the infrastructure plans that we develop. We need to be have infrastructure planning that's more evidence-based, more frequently using a business case, particularly for project selection. And we need to recognize that when we choose, for example, a rapid transit project, it's not just about transportation. It's about community building. Could even be about aesthetics. And we need to recognize that kind of a holistic approach is necessary. And we need to be much more methodical in the way in which we make those selections. Secondly, we need to identify ways to lower costs. P3s, one of the critiques has historically been that they're expensive in terms of the pursuit costs, the process costs, and the ongoing operation. It needs to continue to represent a good premium for the insurance that you buy when you take on a P3 project. As we get better and as we incorporate more P3 techniques even into traditional procurement, we should be able to get the model down and lower the costs and make it more attractive to people as we approach it. The model we have, for example, using in social infrastructure in hospitals should be refining itself to the point where we are benefiting from the experience that we've had. Third area is in building Canadian capacity. We need to have design procurement in a way that builds the domestic P3 industry, and that will allow us to continue to be leaders into the next quarter century. But that means introducing new players, both foreign and domestic. It means ensuring the steady pipeline of projects, as we've heard about before, and it means pursuing and demonstrating innovation. We see lots of examples of this, but we need to really leverage them and build upon them. Third, we need to transfer the right risks. There's a tendency, and I come from the municipal sector originally, to try and load as much onto the bidders as is possible. And in some cases, that isn't the right risk, and they're not in the best position to manage that risk. I think we need to encourage more competition and lower cost to taxpayers, and one of the ways to do that is to make sure that the right risk is applied to the right party. The experience of some recent municipal projects might give us some ideas on what kinds of risks belong with the private sector and what kinds of risks belong with the public sector. I think we need to expand, fifth of all, into local government and to mid-sized firms. If 60% of the infrastructure is in local hands, and if many local firms have the potential but not the opportunity to participate, we need to do something about that. We need to design a model that invites wider participation by the local government sector, and that comes from simple things like standardizing documents and standardizing the terms and conditions of deal structures and things of that kind. The work that the CCPPP has done on bundling, I think, is really important. In Missouri and Pennsylvania, they've demonstrated that big bang type approaches to collecting similar generic type work in things like bridge building has done made a world of difference in their transportation infrastructure. We've done the same in some parts of Canada with school infrastructure or with OPP detachments here in Ontario. We could do more of that kind of thing, and we need to spend some time to make sure we can get that right. The sixth thing, I think, is we need to keep track of our costs. We need to make them transparent. Maddie's done a lot of good work to talk about the kinds of things the infrastructure bank should be doing and the kinds of things that others can probably do better. And one of the things that I think is an important area is to document the delivered costs of what we do with the projects, both P3 and traditional. I saw a list the other day of 72 traditionally procured projects that had been over budget or over time. And I think we can do more to use that information to push down the costs, both on P3s and on traditional projects. And we've got lots of experience, but I think it's important that we have a neutral third party that analyzes and uses good data and ensures that the kind of information that we have available is going to be working to the advantage both of the bidders and of the taxpayers. And finally, and above all, we need to support innovative solutions. If we're going to have the Canadian P3 industry stay on top, we need to demonstrate innovation. And we need to see it in all aspects of infrastructure. I listed some of the areas that we should be continuing to see infrastructure and innovation. It began life as a financial model, and the innovation there was important, but I think there are a whole lot of other areas where we could make make up considerable ground, and there's a lot of experience both internationally and domestically that could be brought to bear on that. I think if we do, the research suggests, as I said, between 5 and 20% innovation savings are possible, and that's not just being parsimonious or shrinking the size of operating rooms. It's genuine creative application of technology and design and ongoing maintenance systems to make sure that we can benefit from that. But that would translate, in given the figure we were just talking about, probably in the order of $200 billion in Ontario alone, 5 to 20% savings, even a 10% savings, means a whole lot more infrastructure is going to be built and a whole lot more taxpayer support is going to be generated. This summary comes out of a report that I prepared after interviewing about 24 leading people in the industry, government and private, as well as in the academic community, and looking at some of the research in the field. And I'd encourage you to have a look at that if anything that I've said looks of interest to you. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to our moderator to follow up. Thank you.